Hello, Terry, my old friend. How are you? Welcome to the podcast.
Uh, Thank you. I'm so happy to be here, man.
I have stunned you with my opening question.
Yes, yeah, you have, yeah. No, as you can see, I'm clearly in an undisclosed location, in this dreary office building. I'm
Yeah, is that part
actually
of the
in.
witness protection program you're in now, or
Yeah, no, that's this is a without a window meeting room at Google's office in San Francisco.
well, good to know. So that's so you work your way up to the meeting rooms that have windows, I guess.
Yes, yeah.
Excellent. Well, so you work at Google, which you've now revealed that.
Yeah,
But for people who don't know you,
sure.
could you just give us kind of a quick sort of who you are and what you do, like a 30-second, 60-second sort of bio overview?
I'll time it. My name is Terry Ryan. I am a developer advocate for Google. For those who may not be into the lingo, a developer advocate is primarily worried about developers using a technical product. So I work for Google Cloud. Specifically, I work in the AI space, and my goal professionally is to make sure that developers who are using our tools are able to use it with as little friction as possible. There's a little bit of like awareness too. So like sometimes I go out and I talk about these things at events or whatnot. But basically, my goal is to get people excited about using our tools, and then try to get them to be successful once they're using them. So it's documentation, code samples, and then, like I said, sometimes events where I get to do like kind of cool demos.
Okay.
So
And it's interesting because this whole advocate position, I didn't really know was a thing. But years ago, right, when you used to work at Wharton Computing and like your first job
yeah,
after that, you joined Adobe as an advocate. So you've been
yeah.
sort of in this advocate space for a long time. Or did you leave that space for a bit and now you're back in it?
No, I mean, so I've been doing this job for about 15 years, or 16, no, 17 years now. Six at Adobe and now 11 at Google. And I had briefly, for about 2 years prior to about a year ago, had gone into engineering managing, which is related but slightly different. So I was a manager, but for engineers instead of develop. But kind of long story. But yeah, I was managing people in developer relations, and we got into engineering, and then we moved back to developer relations. That's part of the joy of corporate life. Of sometimes you put on a different uniform and switch to a different team because a different VP has a need for you to be doing something else.
Well, that's sort of one of the reasons I want to chat with you. I've been trying to chat with more on this podcast with, as opposed to people like me who've been sort of speaking and researching, people like you who are in the workforce, sort of dealing with this. And when I asked you in advance about asked me about change, you sent me an email with some information and these numbers. I got to make sure this wasn't a typo. Um,
Yeah,
you said just in the last few years, there's been 14 reorganizations and gone through 7 different managers.
yeah,
And how long a time frame was that?
2 years.
In How do you reorganize 14 times in 2 years?
Um, so what's cool is that Google reorganizes so much that there's an internal tool called Reorganizer that will do a query against our HR HR systems to show you how many times you change, and that's every time um, my my management chain changed.
Mm-hmm.
So some of those reorgs, like when a VP 7 levels above you changes, it's a reorg. You tend to form a new group or whatnot, but it might not have as much impact on you as, say, when your immediate boss changes, right? That being said, I felt, what did I say, 14?
Mm-hmm.
I definitely felt 11 of them. Like it was a lot of change in a very short period of time. Part of this is I work in technology, right?
Well,
And
yeah.
as anybody who is reading any news article will see, and I work in AI, that space is changing incredibly rapidly.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the kind of cool things about Google, one of the positive things I'll say about it is that the idea that like an org, a group, a person could try something, it doesn't work, and like, okay, well, we'll just move you on to do something else.
Hmm.
It's part of the culture. So we reorg a lot, and some of it is that phenomena, and some of it is the corporate stuff that happens when you have people that have 1,000 people that report up to them.
Sure.
They kind of move people around.
And it is obviously a way of life these days with change and rapid change. And I kind of want to get your perspective, both as someone who's sort of you've been at various levels on the chain of dealing with change. So
Yeah.
both as an employee in such a large organization, how what sort of techniques do you use, or what's your kind of mindset around actually adapting to the change instead of feeling totally just beat down by it or burnt out, or just kind of disengaged and giving up on the whole thing?
So there's kind of two strategies, and one of the tricks that I learned when I was kind of training under a mentor of mine to be a manager, was make sure that however the org changes, you can figure out ways, at least in the short term to medium term, move some labels around on your work so that the work you've been doing, because a lot of times what happens is, right, you're on a project, and then the reorg happens, and then that project falls apart,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because it does, for whatever reason, it doesn't survive. So, and that's one of the most demoralizing things that can happen to people, right?
Yeah.
Like, and you'll get in this period of time where you're like, the work I'm doing is no longer valued, but I haven't been told what to do, and so now I need to look busy because people want me to be doing some, but I don't want to spend time on something that's not useful. So one of the biggest things I learned was figure out ways of organizing your work into individual projects and tasks that you can basically slot into other new priorities. So, a lot of my work was creating content, or creating content is probably one of the big ones, or doing events, and figuring out that, like, oh, these talks that were me talking about this set of products might no longer be applicable, but like they're basically talks about Google as a platform, and I can use that to bridge those periods of time.
Mm.
So I don't have those until I get new marching orders and can, like, okay, now I'm going to shift the work into something new. So that's one of the big tricks I've learned.
Well, I like that because it's sort of this idea of what I call like yielding to what is. It's like you've been doing this work, and then when some changes happen, a lot of people, and myself included a number of times over the years, you sort of just want to put your head down and just keep doing things the same way.
Yeah.
Which in that situation, then they'll come along and be like, oh, well, this isn't. But what you're doing there is just saying, all right, well, here's what I'm doing, here's what I'm good at, here's what I like. How can I adapt it to this new environment so that, and then it's almost like, I'm not saying fooling, but it almost sort of slides it under the radar. Like you're making the connections for
Yeah.
the other people. So you're adapting to the situation instead of just being annoyed by it, or being flummoxed by it.
Yeah. And then using kind of accepting that, like, this is going to be a bridging period of time, like you're trying to manage the bridging time, because like that period of time between when a change happens and you get like a clear new direction that you need to be going in is super demoralizing,
Yes.
and especially for the people under you, um, who have, the further you are away from one of those reorgs, the less insight you have into it. So the less feeling of control you have.
Mm-hmm.
So allowing people to have some feeling of control and agency during that move is really helpful, and doing that for yourself is super helpful.
Yeah, and I think that ties into the idea of like this whole idea that I try to espouse is kind of turning change to your advantage. I think most people look at change as something that happens to them and something they have to get through. I mean, as an improv person, right? I had I had the phrase in my book, which is that not all change is good, but all change is an offer. So that middle area you're talking about, that gap between like, well, this change is happening, or I've seen it where it's like, well, this change is coming, but we don't know exactly when. It's just,
Yeah.
and then when it happens, it's like there's that gap, and in that gap, you can just sort of say, well, this sucks, or you can say, all right, well, what can I proactively do so that when it happens, it's actually to my
Yeah.
advantage?
Yeah. And I think one of the other things, and especially kind of going on your framework, I really like your framework of like hostility to apathy. I can't remember the third one, and then
It's
it's
hostility,
acceptance.
resistance, and apathy.
Okay, hostility, resistance, apathy, and then acceptance, and then excitement.
Yeah,
Right.
and there's
I
hesitation
really
kind of in the middle there, but yeah.
okay. There is okay. So I focused on the ends of it.
You don't have the thing memorized yet.
Yeah, yeah. Um, but one of the things I had this problem, and this problem was actually in my personal life, in my professional life, everywhere. So, which is I tend to overthink and I tend to like predict what's going to happen a lot, right? So I have got like a pretty good, and that serves me really well. I go into a meeting and like someone brings up like, oh, I was thinking about this. You're like, oh, that's great. I wanted to go that way, or oh, I don't want to go that way, but I've already planned why I don't want to go that way, and I'm pretty good about it. But left field stuff threw me for a loop.
Mm-hmm.
The oh, I think we should do something completely different. And what really helped me tackle this was uh, marriage. Was being in a relationship where what would happen is my partner would bring up something, and I would immediately kind of just say no. Oh no no
Mm-hmm.
no no, because it was out of left field. And then what would happen is I would sit with it and think about it for a while, and then be like, oh man, actually that is a good idea, or that's probably the right way to do things. Then I have to go back to my partner, and like we all know the dynamics of that in a relationship,
Oh
saying like,
yeah.
yeah, oh man, I thought about it, and then I realized like, oh, I was doing that at work too. And so the first trick I have for that is the uh that's an interesting idea. I'm going to need to think about that for a while,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
right? And so you've immediately switched from blocking an offer basically
Mm-hmm.
to you're not quite accepting it yet, but you're not blocking it, right? And so that opens up a whole lot of different possibilities for you from both a professional and interpersonal standpoint. Like you don't take that hit of blocking, right?
Yeah. And I would
And
think that
then
there's also, I'm not speaking specifically your relationship, but there's like a cost to be paid.
yeah,
Even if you then go back and say,
yeah,
you know what, I thought about it and you were right. Like it's not the same as if you say, well, let me think about it, right? Because there's already been a little
yeah,
bit of damage because you kind of immediately shut it down.
yeah. And so, and I think just in general, that's kind of how I felt about a lot of the stuff that I've been pausing. And what I've done in the last few years is actually kind of being able to push to not quite getting to excitement as my first step,
Mm-hmm.
but just radical acceptance as a first step.
Yep.
Um, so, yeah. So instead of saying like, "Oh, let me think about that for a while," let's put that on the table. And that's like you have to practice it. You have to train it, right? Because it's not, if that's your thing. Like someone asked me about, I was talking to someone about this again, like acceptance. It's like if you come to a chasm, the way to get over that chasm is to jump over it. There is no way around. You have to learn how to jump over that chasm. And I think acceptance is the same way. Like it's the fundamental thing you have to do. You have to learn how to accept things. You have to learn
Mm-hmm.
how to say like, yep, this is the way things are. Because so many people get lost in the like, oh, well, like, I should have gotten that promotion, or I should have gotten that project,
Yep.
or this shouldn't have happened to me, or and like you're going to have to accept it anyway,
Yeah.
because reality is a very stern taskmaster. Like you can't, like reality is reality. And so training yourself to get to acceptance first, like excitement would be better. I absolutely admit that.
Yeah.
Excitement
Well,
is
that's the reason it's
often,
a ladder. It's like you're not
yeah,
trying. It's like move one or two steps at a time.
yeah,
It's so funny you're talking about that because I'm working on a new keynote to go along with the book. I'm delivering it. At the time we're talking, I'm delivering it next week, and I was just going over this section on. I don't have time to go into all 6 steps of my framework, so I'm going to talk about the first one, the yield. And I literally like was going over this like, there's a difference between understanding and accepting. And I think most people think they're accepting when all they're doing is understanding. So what I mean is like in your example, someone will step to the edge of the chasm and be like, oh yeah, there's a chasm here, but they sort of still are like complaining about it. They understand it, but they haven't been like, oh yeah, here's this thing in my way, and here's what I'm going to do about it. So we get like, so we blur the line and get so caught up in just like, well, I know it's there, so like, no, there's acceptance is a lot more than that. It's like kind of letting go and being in the moment and sort of responding to things.
Yeah. And to kind of flog the metaphor even further, like there's nothing wrong with getting to a chasm and like, can I actually jump? Like, do I have enough room? Do I have enough clearance? Like, do I need to take a running start? It's okay to analyze. And understanding is an important step of that. But like, I think it's a difference between I might need to step back and take a running start to get across it versus, if I drove back to town and got a ladder, I could put it down and yeah, but you can't, right? Like,
yeah, and it's so funny because this isn't even new to the book. I've been saying this for God, I don't know how long since I've been speaking, 20 years. Is that it's not that you never say no, it's not even that you never say yes, but it's just what's your default, right? And kind of to your point, for so many of us, the default, and I fall into this too, to anything new or unexpected, to immediately be like, yeah, but, and like shut it down. And so, like, again, to continue flogging, if you will, with the chasm metaphor, it's also completely acceptable, I think, to pause, analyze, think about it, and then ultimately say, you know what, I don't need to cross this chasm right now. And from a metaphor standpoint, like, yeah, obviously that, sometimes you have to, but there are a lot of situations where, like, if your spouse comes to you with a suggestion or idea, you don't have to say no right away. But when you say yes, and you're not saying I agree, like you said, like let me chew on it. That doesn't mean you can't then come back in 2 or 3 days and say, okay, well, I thought about it, and here's kind of why. But it completely changes the dynamic. So it's not like you always have to agree and give in to everything. It's like, no, It's just where's your default?
Yeah, isn't there a Jim Carrey movie where he just says yes to everything?
Yeah, it's called The Yes Man.
Yes, yeah. Like that's that's not feasible to be that, like to your point. But I think it's go back to the metaphor. So many people act like, oh no, there's not really a chasm there. Or, oh no, that chasm isn't the only way across to where I need to get to. Or like they do so much other stuff than just accept there's a chasm here. I either jump it or I don't jump. Like, and that's what all of that other thought is. It's like not getting to the brass tacks of like, this thing is here. I have to choose how I interact with it some way.
And I don't know how much like anxiety or stress you sort of feel in your life, but I also find that like that level of acceptance is also one of the big keys to not like the people who don't accept are the ones who seem to be the most stressed out. They're most fearful of the future. They're most guilty about the past because they're just like they're putting a lot of mental energy into wanting reality to be different than it is, which is impossible.
Yeah. No, I definitely would tell you that my personal anxiety levels have gone down once I sort of like, I hate to use this word, but it's sort of the right surrendered to, like, nope, this is how you deal with these sorts of things. You accept, okay, this is the reality.
So how did you get to that point? Was it just reminding yourself and practicing, or do you have any other techniques or ways of like kind of getting to that level of acceptance, or as a more of a default response?
Yeah, I think to that story before about like that evolution of stop, let me think about this as an initial step, because that's one very concrete thing you can do, right? Like changing your mentality is difficult. Changing your behavior is a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm.
So setting a rule for yourself. When someone says something to me and my immediate response is no, I'm going to change those words to, let me think about that. Is for me was the big first step.
Mm-hmm.
And then once that also gave up a lot of breathing room in that I wasn't that period of time where you're thinking things over. When you're thinking things over after having said no, and like you have all this resistance, you have all this like cognitive dissonance, you have all of those things that kind of come into play. it freed me up to like realize like, oh, you know, like it got me to stop fighting it quite as much. And then I think it was just a muscle, right? Like it just like the more and more I worked on and practiced doing that, the
Mm-hmm.
more effective it became for me. And like anything else, you know, someone told me this story about politics, and it kind of feels the same way. It's a very Zen. It's a very also like kind of martial art idea
Uh-huh.
of the white belt going through the things and then becoming a black belt and then doing so much that their belt becomes white again. I don't know if you know
Yeah.
that metaphor. Yeah, is so your initial feeling about office politics is like, oh, I don't want to deal with that. That's a whole bunch of BS, and you know, I'm outside of that. And then you find yourself not very effective at work. So you start saying like, okay, well, I'll play the game, right? I know if I propose this, this guy will say no, um, and like you know this. So okay, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to talk to this guy first and like
Mm-hmm.
see if I can get him on board before he says no to me in the group setting and derails me. Okay, and then so you plan it out and you have a little bit of success, and so then you start doing that naturally, like so you start talking to that guy and you start, you know, networking, you start, and then by the time you're done, like you'll just find you're good at politics, office politics, and like you won't be thinking about it anymore because it'll
Yeah.
just be what you do. And I think it's a lot of these things are the same thing, like you think about them in the beginning and you repeat them over and over again as things, but eventually what happens is like that just becomes the way you do things, and it you know it changes your relationship to the whole thing.
Yeah, there's a whole learning model that says you go through like four stages of learning. The first is unconscious incompetence, where you don't know what you don't know. And then you get to conscious incompetence, which is like, oh, you're aware of things you're doing wrong or not doing it. And then conscious competence, which is you can do it, but you got to think about it. And then ultimately unconscious competence was, oh, now you're just sort of doing it. I think kind of that's what you're describing. The problem is pushing through that conscious competence, you know, because that can be hard
Yeah.
to keep reminding yourself and change. But obviously, um, you know, we think it's worth it. So let's talk about. I know I'm sure what your position is now, but I know you have been a manager. I'm not sure if you're
Yeah.
currently a manager or not. I know you kind of move around, obviously. So how do you see this applying or rolling out when you're comes you leading others through change? Whether the change is you're the new manager, or the change is hey you're leading a team and all of a sudden they're being asked to do something different. Kind of what have you found works, or by contrast, what doesn't work when you're leading a team?
So there is a you have an interesting relationship with disclosure, transparency, and honesty when you're a manager.
Mm,
Because from a personal point of view, you want to know as much as you possibly can about the reality. But and so that's you know your instinct as well. I'm going to give other people the exact amount of info that I have so that they're not in the dark. But the thing is that a lot of change is hinted at or suggested or floated, whatever weasel word you want to use for people think like, oh, we think we're going to make this change. You know, we think we're going to reorg your team into another group, but don't tell any of you people that report to you yet. And so you find yourself in this bad spot of like, how do I? And the mistakes are to tell them nothing, and the mistakes are to tell them everything.
mm-hmm.
Right? If you tell them nothing, then they're going to feel betrayed. They're going to feel a lack of trust, and rightfully so. If you tell them everything, all you're going to do is increase their anxiety over something they have no input into.
Yeah.
And so one of the big things I've always done with my people is basically said, like, look, we're in an environment where there's a lot of change. Um, I am not telling you that, like, I'm not telling you that we're in danger of being laid off. I'm not telling you any of these things, but I'm going to tell you some concrete things that I want you to be doing. One, I want you to be caught up to date on LinkedIn and your resume. Just you should always have that ready because that's you should always be ready to deal with that level of change. Two, typically what I'll do is I'll see the kind of future where we possibly might land and figure out, are there skills or products or technologies or whatever that it would be really advantageous for you to learn. And bonus, if multiple paths in the future might rely on this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, we were in the midst of some reorgs, and we were on an engineering team, and one possible outcome was that we could start using this product that we had internally. It's an external product, an open source project, but we would be using it internally, called ADK. Not that the name matters. It's just, so I have a label on what I'm talking about. So our there were multiple possible things that came in front of us. One of them was working directly on ADK as DevRel. One of them was working as an engineer that would deliver products, Google products, using ADK.
Mm-hmm.
Either way you spin it, learning ADK was a good step forward for my people. And so I started gently encouraging them. And that's the other thing. Start gently encouraging them when you see it off in the distance. And then as it gets closer and the possibilities dwindle and it becomes more likely that one of these things is going to happen, then start pushing it harder and harder. So to sum up, like, kind of balance transparency with not causing anxiety, figure out what's going to be necessary in the future and try to start suggesting it ahead of time, and doing a slow bleed, like, basically, if you're always talking about change as possible and you're always discussing the nature of it,
Mm-hmm.
it never slams somebody out of left field, because, like, oh, we knew this was possible. We
Yeah.
were already prepared for it. And that, I think, gives people a lot of confidence
Well,
and
what
stability.
I like about that is that it's very consistent with what you said earlier from an individual standpoint, right? You talked about that, we talked about that gap between the beginning of the change and when something actually happens, and people don't like that. And so this approach, it gives people something to focus on and prepare for. So instead of just, yeah, there might be a big change, there might be layoffs, you might be reorged. It's like, yeah, there's something coming, we're not sure what. Here's how you could start preparing. So it refocuses people instead of just that. Just put your head down and keep doing, nothing we can do about it. So it's like it prepares people.
Yeah, I think in general, there is an inherent instability to change, and people don't like instability. But I think more than that, what people don't like about change is when it blindsides them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this seems to be a recurring theme of what I'm saying today. Blindsiding people, blindsiding is what people have the most trouble dealing with. And so, and it's because people feel out of control. It's just, feeling like, like in reality, like, your house gets hit by a storm. It's that you have no control over it is one of the factors of it that's
Mm-hmm.
so difficult to deal with mentally. So throttling the change so that it does not, like, you get people that they're not expecting particular outcomes, but they are not shocked by particular outcomes. I think really does a lot to help them during change.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, my whole topic is ding happens, right? So it's like the blind side is one of the big things, and yes, people do not like that. So the more you can do to prevent that, I want to pivot a little bit and talk about something a little bit different. Obviously, the big change we are all dealing with right now is artificial intelligence. And with your role, your job, you're sort of at the forefront of a lot of that. So it's a little bit off top, this is a little bit less about, talking about, my brilliance as an improv speaker, and more about, the world at large. So what do we need to be doing to one of the subtitles of my book is Harness Change, right? So what do we, the average listener, need to be doing to start harnessing this change? Because some people are some people are like so far on board with it, they're like completely outsourcing all their thinking to it. Others are
Yeah.
so resistant to it, they're refusing it, and in my opinion, foolhardily just advocating for it to stop, which
Yeah.
that's the chasm, right? Like,
Yeah.
what should we be doing to sort of prepare and make the most of this change so we don't fall behind?
So the first thing I would say is, in sharp opposition to a lot of the leaders in my field, I think that the executives in this space are selling robots. Are hyping robots when in fact we are selling power tools. And so what I mean by that
Mm.
is, the power tool analogy is really easy, right? Like I've got a team of 10 carpenters. I give them a nail gun, right? The reality is, after I give them a nail gun, I probably need much less carpenters, but I still need the carpenters because
Mm.
the carpenters are the people that know where to put the nails, right? And I know that's overly simplistic, but like it's a good way of thinking about this. So, is AI, especially in my field, we're coding, is AI going to reduce the need for individual developers on any given problem? Yeah. I do think it's going to increase the number of problems that we try to solve.
Mm.
And so it really does depend on that. I also think in our field right now, there's a lot of, someone just put this great tweet about CEOs have AI psychosis right now, which is, it's really easy to take AI and build something that's a proof of concept, but to get it from a proof of concept to something that is actually used by people in production still takes a fair amount of labor. And like, I have been building apps with AI that I then push to production. I can tell you there's still a lot of gaps between what you can build.
Mm-hmm.
But like, this is a problem with business decision makers in general. It's one of the reasons why, like, one of the tips of a designer is to not show them, if you ever build a prototype, don't make it pretty, because if
Mm.
it's pretty, they'll think it's done.
Oh, interesting.
um, because like, oh, I see it's working, like it must be done. It's like, no, there's no database here, right? Like, as you know from your experience, like, that's a big part of a lot of major modern apps. And you can definitely write front ends that don't have databases that just do the behaviors so that you can
Yeah.
show people. And then wiring that up is a challenge, to put all the safety and security and business rules and everything in there. So the first thing I would say is, don't buy the overhype. Definitely question people that are saying, oh, we don't need this function anymore, we can just replace it with AI. They are likely thinking that they're buying a robot when in fact these are still just power tools. The second thing I would say is, definitely play around with this stuff, and don't. For it took me a while to be successful with it, mostly because I was also managing at the same time and I just didn't have time to really
Mm-hmm.
focus. But like, realize that, like, just because a particular workflow works for someone else doesn't mean it will work for you. So like, it took me a while to find my rhythm, where like I go and I have a conversation with I work for Google, so it's Gemini.
Mm-hmm.
I have a conversation with Gemini, and basically at the end, saying like, hey, I want to build an app that does X. At the end of it, I have an implementation plan, and I tell it like, hey, take everything we talked about, turn it into an implementation plan that I can hand to Gemini CLI to turn it into code.
Mm-hmm.
And then I go to Gemini CLI and I have it read this thing and do it. And then I go through and kind of talk with it. Like, that workflow works really, really well for me. And everybody, like, no one else that I have met does that particular set of workflow with a particular set of tools and whatnot. So don't play around with it, experiment with it, solve. And this is the other thing: solve problems that you kind of know about. Right.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah, because the
important thing,
temptation is
right?
to go in and think you know nothing about it and be like, oh, AI can help me do this, but then you won't
Yeah.
know if it's doing it right or not.
Yeah, exactly. So my first foray into building these apps, I built like a suite of sailing apps. My hobby is sailing on the side. And so what had stopped me from writing these apps in the past is, I understand all the database part and all the user interface part, but like map-based applications, there is a specialty there, right? But now I can use AI to bridge that gap. So I can check all of the other work it's doing and know, like, oh, it's good.
Mm-hmm.
It's good on this stuff. but then add one bit of a component to it so that I could go that extra step. So that's another thing of like, use it to augment yourself. One, use it to do the stuff you know how to do, but have it do much faster, right? Like, we're seeing this in law, we're seeing this in coding, and we're seeing this other places where like a lot of this stuff, like, you know, a lot of times I went to code something and like I knew like, I made this change. I really should go and make this change every other place where I'm dealing with this thing. But you're just like, no, I'll skip it for now. I'll come back around to it. Now you just tell, hey, I added this piece to the interface. Find all the places where I'm using this and just turn it into a shared function, and like it'll just do it for you. Now,
Yeah.
some of those tools were already there with IDs and whatnot, but like you can go a higher level conceptually. Like I'm working on a problem, an app that I'm building for work, and like I've just told AI, like I told Gemini, like, hey, we don't seem to have fixed the duplication problem, and like you're just running and duplicating things over and over and over again. Can you look and review the code and see where you're duplicating? I think it's here and here, and that's where me understanding the stuff
Yeah.
helps. And like it went off and found where it was duplicating stuff, which is a much higher level than you've been able to have stuff be automated in the past. So that's my thing for it. Experiment with it, play with it, try it.
Well, I love two things in there you said, because essentially the play with it I love, and I think that is very, like, in my language, it's very much like almost treating it like an improv partner, not as like the expert you're going to give your solutions, but play with it, right? Like, I'm the same
Yeah.
way. Like, I've developed over time some workflow. I don't use it nearly as much as you, but I use it for a lot of workflows, and it took me a while to figure out. And I got some AI app years like before the GPT thing happened. I bought some AppSumo product that was like and it was terrible. It just gave me back such crap for my writing. Now, in retrospect, I went into it thinking, oh, I'm going to be able to tell it what to write. And it's going to write. What I needed to do was play and work. So
Yeah.
now with these new tools, it's like, all right, the first go, you don't get the results you want. So then you adapt and try again, and you adjust and try again. And so I love that playful attitude. And the
Yeah.
other thing you said, which I sort of unrelated, but I love the line of if it looks too polished, people will think if it looks too pretty, people will think it's done. Which all of us improv people and speakers and creative types, we're always talking about like just get the first draft done. And this is saying not only is it okay to not be pretty, but it's almost to your advantage to have it not look pretty because people will then know it's a draft or a work in progress. And that's such an interesting. I never really thought of it that way, but it is actually a benefit to making it not pretty.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And you said something I want to riff on, and I can't. I forgot So I'm just gonna accept your offer and say, yeah, a really good point.
All right. Well, if it comes back to you, let
Yeah.
me know. It was about the improv thing. Well, let's talk about the improv thing for a minute. So,
Yeah.
you've, way back in the day, we did improv together, and just kind of how have you seen that sort of, because you're in a very technical field, how, if at all, has the improv experience kind of benefited you?
Yeah, so a couple things. Like one of the best things that improv did is you remember this, that like when a new performer starts, you want them practicing a lot, because when they first start doing improv, everything out of their mouth is scatological or sexual, right?
Yeah.
Because those are the things that we repress, and like
Mm-hmm.
it comes out once you sort of open the floodgates for people
Yeah.
to
Once you
express
tap into that
themselves.
creative flow, allow
Yeah,
the
yeah,
surface level stuff. Yeah.
yeah. And then you do it for a while and you get it out of your system, and then you're ready to be. And so then you can trust yourself. You can trust your humor, um, because you've gotten that out of your system. And so I think being able to trust when like so much of work is dreary boredom,
Mm-hmm.
just like I remember you and I used to complain about this of like work humor.
Mm-hmm.
The you see somebody sitting at a desk that isn't theirs, and you're like, "Oh, Sandy, you look different today," or "It doesn't feel like a Monday," right? Like, uh, so being able to be a person who comes to work this often dreary environment, and bring mirth, is
Mm,
really helpful. And then a lot of my early DevRel experience was speaking at events,
mm,
and the ability, you know, I have bombed on stage with you, improv wise. I have bombed. Like you just go out and you try
yeah,
something, you think
sometimes it
it's
doesn't
funny,
work.
and the audience goes, "No,"
Yeah.
right? Um, and like you do that a bunch of times, and like it doesn't embarrass you anymore,
Hmm.
And so, having done events where I was trying to show live stuff, like that's one of the most exciting things you can do technically is doing a live event, a live demo of your stuff. Um, and if it bombs, like I've intentionally made a fool out of myself in front of people, that this thing that everyone knows sometimes, you have connectivity problems, doesn't work, doesn't phase me, and didn't phase me for the longest time. So I would say the confidence to show up as yourself,
Hmm.
and the ability to weather any sort of bad public embarrassment because you've intentionally publicly embarrassed yourself in the past have been huge things that I brought from improv.
Oh, I love that, like sort of a desensitization, and it's funny with improv and things in general. I say, you can't. What I like about improv is, it's impossible to prepare for everything,
Yeah.
but improv sort of helps you prepare for anything. So it's
Yes.
like, some people drive themselves crazy trying to think of every branch on the tree of what could possibly go wrong. I'm like, you're never gonna, because Murphy's gonna throw you something. Well,
Yeah.
with improv, it's like, hey, no matter what happens, I'll figure it
Yeah.
out. Like I'll do something.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's also, like one of, especially working for Google, one of the things I get in public appearances is a little game we all like to call in the speaking biz, stump the chump,
Hmm.
where like one person against an audience of 200 or 500, like the odds that someone in that audience knows something I don't know is, you know, an absolute certainty, right? But you're the one on the stage, right? And so like someone will try to ask you questions, not because they have legitimate questions, because they want to show they're smarter than the
Yeah.
guy on stage. And when the guy on stage is from Google, it gets even worse because like we're just humans, but like there was this, perception of Google as like a, smart place. And like my ability to just have no ego and just go, "Oh yeah, no, that's interesting. I've never heard of that," or "That's an interesting thought. I don't have an answer for you." um, Being able to do that, like not being flustered by, left field in that regard, is super helpful. And that I think came from improv.
Yeah, and just the ability to say I don't know and not have it be the end of the world. I think that's something all managers can, like, kind of, you're talking about the transparency versus oversharing. It's like, I think the ability to say I don't know, because I think we've all seen experts, managers, leaders who just start babbling because they don't want to say I don't know, and it's like the most
Yeah.
roundabout double speak, and they leave, and you're like, they don't know what they're talking about, and it's just like,
Well, yeah, there are issues that are really pertinent here. I don't know that we can get into all of them, but the ones that I am aware of, I think we're very clear that
mm,
things will happen, and we'll continue to persevere.
yeah, well, I'm gonna write that down because I'm gonna say
I
that next
could,
time
I
someone
could,
asks me a question.
I could do that for hours
Well,
now.
well, the
Yeah,
improv helps with that too. It's
yeah, exactly.
all right, cool. Hey, this is it's been fantastic. We're kind of gonna wrap up here in just a few moments. I got one kind of final question I want to ask before we get to that. If anyone wants to learn more about what you do, connect with you, follow you, what are the best places to reach you?
God. So I would say LinkedIn right now.
Mm-hmm.
Terrence P. Ryan on LinkedIn. Um, I used to be much bigger, much more involved with Twitter. Like many people, I've kind of gone away from that in the
Sure.
last year. So LinkedIn is probably the best place if you want to get in touch with me. Um,
I was going to make a joke about an out of print social media platform that is so old now that I can't remember what it was called. So let's say you work at Google. What was Google's Facebook alternative thing they
Oh,
tried?
Google Plus.
Google Plus. Yeah. You're not active there. That's not where people should go connect with you.
So Google Plus has been defunct for quite a long time. It was defunct when it was Dead Man Walking when I joined 11 years ago.
Ah.
So,
But that's the whole thing about you try stuff. Google's willing to try
yeah,
stuff, and it doesn't work,
yep.
and and you just Google Plus doesn't work. You just put on your Google glasses and go somewhere else.
Nice one. Zing.
I do what I can. I don't want to get you in trouble with your bosses.
Nah.
Excellent. Well, cool. Well, we'll put that LinkedIn link there too if you want to connect with you. Get more info about you. Maybe they want to learn about AI or Google or anything like that. So I want to finish up by asking you a final question. This is kind of how I try to wrap up all my podcasts here. I talk about the idea of saying yes and instead of yes but, because I think the world would be a better place if everyone just started with a default response of yes and, kind of one of the things we talked about, the default response. So what is one small thing that you think, if everyone did, it would make the world a better place?
God, learn how to drive.
That is an answer I get when I ask that question on stage.
I think the older I get, the more I wish other people would value, develop, cultivate, and use empathy. I know that seems kind of squishy and granola-y, but I think empathy is underrated. Being able to understand where someone is coming from, understanding why someone is behaving in a particular way, allows you to control yourself so much more, right? Oh, this isn't personal, or this is cultural, or whatever. It's nothing about me. Is hugely helpful. And then just being able to better interface with other people because you have empathy for them. So my vote would be, if people could, empathy doesn't have to mean sympathy, right? But if I could just understand where other people are coming from better, if more people understood where everyone else and valued understanding that, I think the world would be a better place.
Well, I love it. That is a great answer. Not squishy at all. I think it's very, especially in this world that gets more technical, I think it's an incredibly important skill. It's going to be a differentiator, I think, moving forward. So, Terry, thank you very much. This was great, and hopefully we will be able to chat again soon.
Yeah, it's great. Thanks for having me.
Did that sound?